Hello everybody, it's Fatmarrow, the shoddy mapper, author of Shoddily Mapped Maps. Today I wanted to talk about a subject close to my heart. Not ice cream, but taking pictures in public. So I've done a lot of work as a photographer, which has stood me in good stead for getting material for maps. And some of the worst photographs I've ever taken have been the ones I take for material for maps. Um, so there are many pitfalls to do with taking pictures for maps, and I would like to share some of them with you. So I'd like to talk in two parts with a largely static backdrop, so this will be an extremely interesting video. The first thing is about actually doing the photography in public places, and the second thing is about what you can and can't use and have to be aware of. So to start off with, let's just have a look at some places I've taken photos, allegedly. So there's a nice shot of a train in the London Underground, and that's another bit that's in the Moorgate Great Northern Station, which is not quite part of the underground but sort of is, and I thought that looked like some nice grungy textures I could lift off that, perhaps. And what have we got here? That's my son sitting on a bench by a canal in Islington in London, and it's a fairly public place. People walk around, look at the dreary canal and think about throwing themselves in. That's topically connected, so that's what happens if you throw yourself into a canal in London. That is the West Norwood Cemetery, which has gone by many different names and probably not that one strictly. Lovely place, very interesting, lots of creepy stuff, a bit like my house. And oh look, there's my son again at Legoland. And why am I telling you all this? And there's the Dulwich Woods, a lovely little oasis of calm. And finally, there's Canary Wharf, which seems to be missing the Eye of Sauron, but I think that's due to go up next year. So what connects all those places? What connects them is that you can't take photographs there without permission, in theory. So let's just zoom back. So the London Underground is owned by some convoluted arrangement, but it is not public property. And that canal development is part of a recent development with several tall buildings next to it, and that almost certainly means that they've made the whole bit private. There are many reasons to do that. Stopping photography is not the main reason, but it's a useful thing for them to do that to get rid of any troublemakers. Strictly speaking, the cemetery is owned by a private company or a trust or something similar, but it's not strictly public land, I don't think. Legoland is entirely private, and also you're governed by the conditions on the ticket. You buy a ticket to go in, and that sets conditions which you agree to abide by when you walk through the gates. Dulwich Woods is owned by the Dulwich Estate, which is something harking back to medieval times almost. No, not quite, but it feels like it sometimes. I actually had to ask the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for permission to chop down a tree in my front garden, because he now runs the Dulwich Estate, so that's very exciting for me. I have a letter from John Major telling me I can chop down a tree, so go me. Right, Canary Wharf is a huge private development, all kinds of shenanigans in the 80s when Margaret Thatcher spurred that on, and yeah, less said about that better. So that's where we are. In a private place, you don't have any automatic photographic rights. This is generally true in all countries. I am mostly talking about the UK, and this is not official legal advice, but hopefully it will help you avoid some pitfalls. In a private place, you don't really have any automatic permissions to do anything. Now, of course, in Docklands, people use their phones all the time to take pictures of each other sealing deals and eating the livers of small children, and nobody raises an eyebrow. But as soon as you whip out a big camera with a big lens, people start to look at you a bit differently. I knew I should have put some clothes on at the time. So, and there's a thing that when you cross from personal use with photographs into commercial use, everything kind of changes. You get a whole different attitude, a whole different set of rights, people apply things differently. Now what you're doing here is not necessarily commercial in the strict sense, but it's going to look like you are. So you have to be aware of what goes on. The contrast is that taking a picture in a private place, such as on the street, is permitted. With a few exceptions of things you can do wrong, but basically, in a public place, you have the right to take a picture of anything else, especially if it's in the same public place. Now, I show this picture because it's the only time I actually got accused of breaking the law. Oh, the irony. So, if you take a picture in the middle of London, in Moorgate this was, you get Jobsworth security guards coming out and telling you you've broken the law. Which, if somebody comes and asks me what I'm doing, I'll be happy to explain. But if their first opening gambit is you've broken the law, and I know full well I haven't, I'm going to get a bit arsey back, which is the wrong thing to do. I'll come back to that. So you've got to be mindful that security guards are just doing their job in a heightened security environment, in most cases. But they have no right to stop you taking pictures or to insist that you delete any. No right to touch your camera or to touch you, even in a special place. They may have a very different view of that, either through ignorance or they don't care. But best thing to do is to know your rights and be polite but firm, and to ask somebody to explain why they have come to that conclusion. For example, what is the statutory basis for you saying I've broken the law when I don't think there's anything that says that, and so on. What's this? Yeah, so the other thing to bear in mind is that, I want to take a nice picture of a nice door in Antibes, for example, for my latest map. But that is actually somebody's door, so you need to be respectful and cheerful where possible. Perhaps I'm not being respectful, but there you go. Luckily, in a place like Antibes, it's full of tourists with big cameras, so you don't stand out taking these sort of shots. Though I have been approached a couple of times there by people who were joking and being polite and friendly and whatever. So in terms of attitude, if you're going out taking shots of things for a map, and the reason you might be doing that is to get textures, so I'll probably lift that texture wholesale off that, put it in a map. Also, you might be getting inspiration for models. So here I was looking at the details of the rustication, which, it took me a long time to find out what that word was and what it meant, and I slightly regret going down that path. But there you go, that's part of the fun of building buildings in Unreal. Or any other map editor. So, yes, and the other thing is just, I recommend just being cheerful, and you act like you're completely entitled to do what you're doing, generally because you are. And I suggest just being quick on your feet and not hanging around, and certainly not sort of setting up a tripod or anything, even though there are also other good reasons not to do that. So exceptions to taking the exceptions to it being fine to take pictures in public are, for example, you could invade somebody's privacy. It's one thing saying you're just taking a picture of a building from a public place, but if there's somebody getting changed the other side of the window, that's a civil matter, but people don't generally approve of that, and you could get done for that. Though not strictly speaking arrested, because it's a civil matter. And this is in the UK, may differ elsewhere. And also the fact that there's that nuance doesn't mean that people upholding the law are going to necessarily treat you with all deference to what it actually says. Again, thinking of the US there. If you go into an event like Legoland or a one-off event, there's conditions on the photography as part of the ticket. Usually no commercial photography, no big cameras, no sticking a camera up your bottom or something, or anybody else's bottom. And I've got nothing against that. I just, children, strictly speaking, it turns out you don't need permission to take pictures of children in public, but my advice is just not to go there. You just don't need that aggravation, and neither do the parents and the child. One exception that you need to be aware of is that if you're obstructing the pavement, the police can do you for that. I forget the actual charge, but again, if you're going to get in the way, you're opening yourself up to people wanting to do something about you. So don't make anybody want to do anything about you. Defamation, something to be aware of. Again, it's a civil matter, not a criminal matter, but if you take a picture of somebody particularly, and you either describe the photograph or use it in a way that is negative about them, you open yourself up to defamation. This is a particular UK thing because we have a great set of defamation laws. In the US, you get a lot more freedom because of the First Amendment just don't use things in a negative way. I mean, as an amateur mapper, we have to tread lightly and borrow and be grateful for what we've got. And if you're, taking a picture of McDonald's headquarters, don't fill it with demons, because you, strictly speaking, open yourself up to a defamation charge. So, that's a long shot, but again, think of what you're actually suggesting with your map. I mean, for most of my stuff, it's just background. It's a place. It evokes a sense of place. I'm not saying anything about Antibes by doing an Antibes map. I especially don't want to suggest anything bad about Antibes. I love the place. It's a beautiful place. I'm inspired to map it because it's a nice place. It's an interesting set of roads, and it just fits together nicely with a lot of interesting details, which for abstract what's the word? Abstract reasons just makes a nice kind of map, nice flow. I certainly do not wish to encourage any negative behaviour or suggest anything negative about Antibes. There we go, covering my arse, but it's true. Anti-terrorism is particularly a thing in the UK. It's always been there. The US is starting to get a bit hyper about that too. Now, you're not breaking the law by appearing suspicious to someone. If a policeman thinks you're behaving suspiciously, they have rights to search you. But that has limits, and security guards do not have any rights. They can move you on from private property, but they can't touch your camera, they can't look at your photos, ask to delete them. And even the police don't automatically have the right to delete your photographs. They can ask to look at them under anti-terrorism legislation, but to do that they've got to have a reason to believe you are behaving suspiciously and maybe looking to commit an anti-terrorist crime. Most of my crimes are against fashion, but you never know. And generally, if you talk to a police officer, you can explain what you're doing, but I'll come back to that. So the reason somebody can search you, a policeman can do that in the UK, is if they suspect you're carrying drugs, weapons, stolen property, or items that could be used to commit a crime, such as an act of terrorism or to cause criminal damage. And if anybody goes that route, well, it's getting a bit heavy, but make sure everything is documented and ask everyone to clearly explain what they're doing and what the basis for it is in the statute. And again, there's not an automatic right for anybody to confiscate your stuff or delete your photographs. They can do that if things get really bad, but they'll generally need a court order to destroy things and so on and so forth. I'm not an expert in that stuff, that's just what I'm aware of. One little funny extra thing is that in some countries, especially in Europe, there's a thing to do with the freedom of panorama, it's called, where actually you're very restricted in some cases as to what you can take pictures of if it's a cultural value or some sort of copyrighted object in a public space. Used to be the case in France till last year. Thank goodness it's not. Otherwise my Antibes map would be breaking a lot of French law probably. In Italy it remains very restrictive, basically bonkers. You need to get permission from the Ministry of Culture to take pictures in a public place. Now clearly, pardon me, that is overlooked massively for tourists, but if again you're carrying a professional looking bit of kit, you might get somebody being an arse hole to you. So some general tips just to deal with that section. Have a card with your rights written on it perhaps, or at least know your rights. And if you want, if you've got an official sort of role doing a map, or semi-official, maybe have a letter printed out from somebody who's making the game that you're doing a map for to say that, they understand that you're making a level for the game and need to do photographic research, and have it on headed paper or official, or give some contact details, just so, it doesn't look like you're completely winging it in a dodgy way. For the US, I suggest you look at the ACLU site because they've got a whole lot of stuff on this. You have a lot of First Amendment protections, and they are generally ignored, as far as I'm aware, when you're taking photos. Very important: don't use a tripod, don't use flash. Draws attention to yourself, and it blocks the way. It leaves you open to people saying you're obstructing the pavement. Just be quick on your feet and move on before anybody's had a chance to wonder what you're doing. And again, just look like you own the place, completely entitled. Just get used to people looking like you, like you're naked and dribbling, and hopefully you aren't also naked and dribbling. And another top tip is just to go on an overcast day to wherever you're going to avoid harsh shadows from the sun. And if you're not, then, or if you're in somewhere like Antibes where it's mostly sunny, look at different times of day to get some places in shadow completely, or in sun completely. More sun helps with things like crazy bump making normal maps because it defines more clearly the edges. But it can be a bit off sometimes, and you can get inconsistencies with textures lit from different sides, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So I go on overcast days, and thankfully, because I live in the UK, I have a lot of those. Yes, so hooray for our weather. So there we go, exciting. Very dynamic video. Ooh, the next bit I'm just going to try and whiz through because it's legal stuff. When can you use images involving other parties' rights? This is slightly my day job, but I'm not offering official advice on this. You'll notice that in games, commercial games, AAA games, logos are removed or altered, and shapes of vehicles, guns, etc. are altered to differ from the original, and there are reasons for this, which may or may not apply to you. With my maps, if you see me doing stuff, I may appear cavalier about third-party rights, as in I just take the picture, stick it in, and that's because, first of all, it's a work in progress, and I may have a final pass if I can be bothered to remove the offending articles, especially for more litigious corporations. The use is mostly incidental, but I'll come back to that. I'm also doing this as a personal project, and I'm not doing it for profit or with any expectation of profit. And that does slightly alter the situation. I mean, there are a thicket of IP rights surrounding stuff in my levels, but a lot of these fail to bite. And that doesn't mean that big companies can't throw their weight around and bully you out of using stuff, especially in the US. If somebody's going to take you to court or send you a cease and desist to remove their stuff from your level, it doesn't matter if you can actually use it. That's the point where you take it out, because winning a battle like that in the US means you've lost, unless you're made of money. Anyway, but I'm not likely to be on anybody's radar, and that's a thing that people used to license firearm brands in games, I believe, but at one point one of the big companies just decided not to bother. Because people have been bullied into doing it, or they didn't want to cause any trouble, but actually there wasn't, strictly speaking, a need to license things, as far as my understanding goes, which I'm not offering as official advice, blah blah blah. So, different kinds of rights you got, briefly. Copyright covers a lot of things. So you can have the more obvious copyright in the reproductions of paintings, photographs, statues and logos. So your shop logo is also a picture as well as a logo, and there is copyright in that. Copyright lasts a very long time. A lot of stuff in Europe is 70 years plus the lifetime of the author. It varies from there, but you're looking at, best part of a century for a lot of stuff, plus. And one thing that's not very well known is that there is copyright in architectural drawings, and under UK law at least, and largely European law, it can be infringed by reproducing the finished building. So if I copy a building that is built within the last century, I'm pretty certain to be infringing the copyright. I mean, there are further exceptions to that, but it's not something that's well known. But copying a Renaissance church, you're going to be fine. So this is mainly a problem for landmark buildings which are built within the last century or so. So the new Reichstag in Berlin, make an exact copy of that, and you may actually be infringing copyright as well as some other stuff. I have little idea about German law on that front, so I'm not going to speculate. There are exceptions to copyright law, but these are generally considered to be more broad than they actually are. It's personal and domestic use, I'm fine, is not usually as broad as people think it is, and it's not really a thing. Now, there is some protection for incidental inclusion of stuff within a photo. So if you're taking a picture of a street, the fact you've got some shop logos in there isn't likely to be considered a proper infringement, and certainly few people are going to bother suing you. But this is not entirely straightforward to judge what is incidental, and if you're putting something into a game from a photograph that you've taken, then it's probably not incidental, because you're actually deliberately using it. So again, that exception won't bite as much as you think it will. Other things, registered designs or unregistered designs. Unregistered designs. I find it very hard to say, which is quite a drawback for IP law. These cover the shape of things, the appearance of things, the surface decoration, so on. It's an interesting right. It's not very well known how it applies because it's not often litigated. Uh, but this you get registered designs for products. So if you have a vacuum cleaner, say a Dyson, let me use that trademark in a very cavalier way, then there's probably a registered design covering the shape of it, at least to the extent that it doesn't cover the functional aspect of it. But it turns out that the way the law is drafted in the UK, at least, it's very hard to infringe because you're not selling the registered product. If I include an exact copy of a Dyson vacuum cleaner in my level, I am probably okay. I'm not committing to that because I'm not selling a vacuum cleaner. I'm not selling anything at all. But if I was to sell anything, it would be a computer game or a part of a computer game. So actually, you kind of dodged registered design law. Not committing to that, but I think so. Trademarks, again, a shop name is also a trademark. It's the brand that's used. Companies protect their brand, so anything with a label on it, my air conditioner with Hitachi on it, there's a trademark covering that. Possibly more than one. There could be a trademark covering the graphical design of the logo, and also one covering just the word Hitachi, which there probably is. Now, again, there might be a slight get out because under UK law, a person infringes a registered trademark if he or she uses in the course of trade a sign which is identical with the trademark in relation to goods or services which are identical with those for which it is registered. So there's two possible cop-outs there. Is it in the course of trade? I am not doing this for money. I'm not selling anything. I'm just doing it for my own enjoyment and letting others play on it. I would say probably not in the course of trade, but I'm not going to commit to that either. And is it in relation to a goods or service which is identical with what it's registered on? Well, I'm not doing a vacuum cleaner again, or I'm not doing an air conditioner, I'm doing a game level. So it's probably not the same goods or services. But again, not committing to that. You get further freedoms in the US because of the First Amendment protection, freedom of speech, which applies to a lot more than speech. But that is US specific. So just because you're okay in the US doesn't mean you're completely fine everywhere. You may run into trouble elsewhere. But by and large, if you're making add-ons for games and you're not doing it for profit, and the game is not a AAA game even, then you're probably fine because no one's going to care, take the trouble. There's nothing really at stake. You're not making any money off anybody. Nobody's losing trade because you're doing these things. Nobody's losing money because you're doing these things. In extreme cases, if somebody objects to the way you're using their brand in your game, if you are using a Hitachi air conditioner as some kind of handheld weapon, or if it's designed to explode because it's badly made, these are things which they might object to and ask you to take it out, and I think that's reasonable. So use things with respect, use them in a low-key way, in an incidental way as far as possible, and you're probably fine. And if anybody objects to anything, just take it out. That's my advice, not officially legal advice. So I hope that helps. Always interesting, and I hope this wasn't too boring to watch. There we go. Boing, boing, boing. Goodbye.